welcome to the first official show of the Muster Room.
Wow.
The first official show.
You should feel special to be the guest
You
on the
should feel
first official show.
Really special.
I am so I'm a narcissist, right? At heart, that's
Yeah.
like my thing. Like, how can I be a narcissist at all costs, right?
Yep.
So being invited to be the very first guest, that's
first.
like totally an ego boost.
So with us here, for those that are listening and for those that are viewing, Paul Lewis, or as most of you may know him on TikTok, Paulie Paul.
Paulie Paul.
Paulie Paul with over 1 million followers on TikTok. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But allow us to be the first to welcome you to, where are we right now?
We are in the Smoking Shields headquarters in
Floral Park, New York.
Floral Park, New York. Yeah.
The Smoking Shields headquarters in Floral Park.
I literally had no idea where we were at.
This is the chapter headquarters for all Smoking
it.
Shields in the country.
Yeah, which is pretty impressive. And this room is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. So for
I
those
wish my
of you
basement looked like this.
that are listening and not watching on whatever platform we're going to be using, you need to be watching right now because you need to see this backdrop. It's gorgeous. It is the ultimate man cave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So without any further ado, let's get into this first official. I'm going to keep saying that because I'm so proud. You know what? For the past 3 weeks, we've been talking about doing this podcast. And when we were talking about who we wanted to host for our first official guest, I said, I think I got the perfect person.
You did. That's the first name that popped
The
into your
first
head.
name that popped up was Paulie Paul Lewis.
And it's an incredible opportunity too. You and I have been friends for a few years now,
Yeah.
and
Which is a miracle in and of itself.
yeah,
Right.
Usually I sabotage my friendships after like 3 weeks, but the fact that we made it 3 years, it's kind of a big deal for me.
Yeah. So I'm super excited to be able to be here with you, and to have a friendship flourish the way it has. And we'll get into that too as how we officially met.
Okay.
One of the things that we want to just make sure that all our guests know is that we're called the Muster Room for a reason. We just want to hang out and shoot the shit like police officers do from time to time.
All right, so let's get into this podcast.
Yes.
So I'm super excited. Again, our first official podcast with probably what I would believe is one of the most popular law enforcement officers in the country.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, Eric Potts. But again, specifically because of your social media following. But before we get into that, let's take us through who Paulie Lewis is. How did you start? Why did you get into law enforcement to begin with?
So, Paulie Lewis, I am someone that is driven by purpose, right? So, my whole life, I was like, how can I do something that mattered? So, a lot of people ask me, did you want to be a cop ever since you've been a kid? The answer for me is no. Because, again, what brings me back to what I wanted is just to do something that mattered. So, I got my bachelor's degree in social work. And then immediately after I got my bachelor's degree in social work, I went to grad school and I got my master's in social work with clinical social work, a specialty in mental health. And I was doing all my internships. I was in a 3-year program and, I was doing great work, but I feel like it wasn't big enough. A lot of people, unfortunately, as much help that you give them as a social worker, if someone has severe and persistent mental health issues, it's hard to get them back on track, right? And for me to put my heart and soul into somebody and not see the results that I wanted, I mean, they need that help, they need that support, but it just didn't feel like I was actually making the impact that I wanted to. So in the last, couple years of grad school, actually over social media, I started networking with police officers, learning the field inside out. And I'm like, okay, this feels even bigger. This is maybe what I want to do. So as I started getting closer to graduate, I started meeting more and more police officers, and I was like, this is totally it for me. And to skip to the end of the story, I got my degree, and then the following day, I signed my conditional offer of employment at a police department.
Wow, good timing.
So yeah, perfect timing. And
So you graduate college.
yes.
The next day, you sign your conditional letter of employment.
Yep.
And for what department was that for?
So Weare, New Hampshire.
Weare, New Hampshire. Now, paint the picture for those of us who don't really know New Hampshire. Is it a large agency, small? What are we talking about?
So the agency I worked for is very small. We cover a big terrain, so 60 square miles. It's like all dirt roads. It's all grass. It's farmland. The total opposite of what I'm used to, because I grew up on the beach in Massachusetts, but when I got the passion to become a police officer, I wanted to become one at all costs. So whoever is down to hire me first, that's who I wanted to work for. And it got me, 2.5 hours north to New Hampshire.
How many agencies did you apply for originally?
When I went to New Hampshire, I took something called a Great Bay exam, and they submit your score to everybody that wanted the results of it. So about 80 agencies. So they kept emailing me. I didn't apply to them all. I applied to 3, and I took 3 PT tests, 3 oral boards, and out of the 3, whichever one was going to ask me to be on, I was totally down for.
So you took 3 PT tests. Now, you told me earlier before we turned on that you used to be pretty buff. What happened?
Paulie version of buff, right?
Yeah.
So when I was first applying, I was probably like 130 pounds, 5'7", and I spent 2 years, like 6 days at the gym, eating tons of carbs, tons of protein. I got up to like 150 pounds.
Wow!
But it was like muscle 150. So I was so proud of it. That was the biggest I've ever been.
Yeah, I've seen some of your photos. I'll be honest, you were looking pretty good.
I haven't been 150 pounds since 3rd grade.
I was born at 150 pounds. Yeah.
Now I'm obese, up to like 162, 5 surgeries. Like, it's killed my body. But no, I mean, working out has always been important to me. It still is.
Yeah.
I just, it's hard for me now with my injuries that we'll talk about later to get to where I was, but it's still important to me.
Yeah. So, again, you signed that contract with the Weare. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Weare.
Weare?
Yeah.
Weare.
Just like
it's my New York accent.
Like Weare, like over there, Weare.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Weare.
Yeah.
So the Weare Police Department in New Hampshire. How long after you signed the contract did you actually get the call to start the academy?
So how it works in New Hampshire is you start working before the academy starts.
Interesting.
So what you do is like you'll get your firearm certification, you do the taser class, and you'll basically be a ride along until the academy starts. So you get to like learn the town, get to learn the field a little bit. So I got sworn in mid-July, July 2018. The academy started the end of August. So at that time, I was still living in Massachusetts. I was working in New Hampshire, so I was commuting about 2 hours every day. And in my head, I'm like, I just got to get to the academy because New Hampshire's an overnight academy. So once I started the academy, I knew I wouldn't have to be doing the driving. So it was about, 5 weeks after being sworn in that I started the academy.
So you're saying before you went to the academy, you got certification for firearms. So you're carrying at that time while you're doing the ride along, you're carrying a weapon and taser?
So as long as you got certified, yes.
Wow.
Without even going through any of the...
That's crazy. I've never heard that
That is
before.
nuts.
Wow.
That's kind of
So-
liability-ish.
I didn't get certified for firearms. So the first time I shot a gun was like 2 days before the academy. That's when as long as they issued the gun and everything.
Which is actually pretty normal because
Yeah.
I know, from what I've seen, most law enforcement officers really don't shoot guns until they actually become cops.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty normal. So you are doing this ride along for about a month and a half. Now, during that time, were you like, did it broaden your spectrum of what being a cop really was?
Oh yeah. Because I mean, you get fed all this information, and stories can only take you so far unless you're actually out there, living the experience. You don't feel the adrenaline rushes. You don't. See the human to human interactions. You don't see, the devastation that can happen at even like a car accident, like anything. So you don't get the raw emotions unless you're actually out there in the cruiser.
And now, how many 911 calls typically would you respond to, during your shift in this department?
So it can be hit or miss. We can go an entire shift without a call at all, or we can have one of those nights where we're just back to back to back.
Yeah.
So I would say, again, we were a department of 12, and an average night there'd be like 4 to 5 calls. Nighttime would be, usually the domestics. Daytime would be the more trivial calls, but each shift is busy in its own way.
All right, so you graduate the academy and you get assigned to a sector, or how does that work? Like, what's your response area?
So we usually have, so our policy was at least 2 guys on at nighttime. You could only have 1 guy on during the daytime. So we patrol the entire town. So I got out of the academy and I immediately started night shift. So there was 2 guys on my shift, and I was assigned, my FTO was one of the guys.
Okay.
So he was pretty good. He was younger than I was. I started at 27. He was 25, I think. So we were both pretty young. My entire department was pretty young.
Did you find it weird that somebody was younger than you who was training you on how to be a police officer?
So honestly, no, because he was a beast. He was like a perfect match for me. Like, he had his act together.
Can we say his name on the podcast?
Yeah, sure. His name's Matt Beltate.
Shout out to Matt for being awesome.
What's up, Matt?
What's up, Matt? He left Weare. Actually, he was applying to another city at the time that the shooting happened. He was just about to leave and stayed on longer just because he's a good guy. And,
That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but he's still active law enforcement?
Yeah, he is.
Oh, well, shout out to Matt, and, we wish you the best of luck, and, be safe out there for sure. So, walk us through what it was like actually now officially being a police officer for, now it was really only a short period of time until the incident occurred.
It was. So, the quick timeline, got sworn in July, academy ended in December. I got off FTO in May, so I was on FTO for 5 months, and then the shooting was August 1st, 2019.
All right, so I think that's a good transition.
Yeah,
so
let's talk about
let's
that
talk
day.
about the actual incident itself. So walk us through what the day was like, even prior to getting on shift. Did anything feel weird to you, or was it just one of those normal days?
So I always think of, think about like TV shows where like that person's smiling, everything's going good, and like you just know something's coming, right? For me, I think back now, and it just felt like too pure and too happy for something not to go wrong that night. So I remember the shift before. It was my first ever overtime shift, and I was working the overtime shift with the guy who graduated the academy right before I did. So we were both brand new, and we were doing a shift together. I was just off FTO. He sort of was too, and it just felt like we were two young kids running the town together, and it just felt cool.
Yeah.
And I remember that night on that shift, he grew up in the town, so he knew all the beautiful spots. So he brought me out to the most perfect place in the town where you could see the stars, and it was just quiet. It was about 2 a.m, and that is just a memory I'll never forget. Him and I just kind of vibing and being cool together. And the very next shift was, the Wednesday, my typical shift, and I was on with just my sergeant, who again was pretty young. He was 26.
That's really young.
And I was 27, like I said. And a lot of stuff was happening that night, actually. Like, there was a lost kid, and just like it was just one of those nights where there was a lot of calls back to back to back. But there was finally a lull in the night. It was like 1 o'clock, and one of the cruisers needed maintenance, and so we emptied out an entire cruiser because we were about to drop it off, down the street to get repaired. I was going to bring him back, so we were following each other, and then flash forward 30 minutes. That's when the call came in, 1:30 a.m.
What was the call?
Yeah, tell us about it.
So the call came in as a domestic, right? We got a lot of information pretty quickly, and I let my sergeant, who had 5 years on, handle, the radio. He knew what to ask, but it came in as a domestic, and a wife was being held hostage by her husband with multiple firearms. We got information that he took 60 Xanax, right? So we knew his mind wasn't going to be in the right place no matter what.
Yeah.
It's not someone you're going to be able to negotiate with. A, like, he's holding his wife hostage. B, he just pretty much overdosed on all these pills. So immediately, my sergeant starts calling for backup. But what's tricky about my town and the surrounding towns are, we all close. So we're not 24-hour towns. My town closes from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. The towns around us are smaller towns and close at like midnight and 1 o'clock. So there wasn't a lot of backup nearby, and that's typical for New Hampshire.
So who do you call for backup?
So the sergeant called for
State
police, but also there's a town named Goffstown nearby that was still on. I New Boston, all those towns nearby, but they're still pretty far away because we're a 60 square mile town.
Yeah, so what would the response time be for them to actually get to you?
So, they didn't arrive till after the shooting went down, and we were 10 minutes out. So, the first car for backup to arrive was probably 25 minutes after we asked for them.
Right.
Which, we're in New York now. That is like polar opposite from what I've seen around here.
Very different. So you guys show up on scene to this domestic. You start to talk to the wife, and then what happens?
Yeah, so we pull up to the street, and, Weare is a very creepy town. Like, it's so dark. There's one street light in the town. There's no stoplights. It's dirt road. So, we're going down this long, quiet road, trees and leaves surrounding us, and it's very dark. So we pull up to the house, and we're on the road. He parks. I pull ahead of him. And
can I just ask you one other question? Because you already know there's guns involved. You said, so what's your mindset as you're driving there, going to this call? What is your mind? What are you thinking?
So I'm like, this is
fear, scared.
No, I remember thinking back, and I was like, this is like the real deal. Like something bad could go down.
Was this like one of your first calls where you were like, oh shit, this could be like the real thing?
Yeah, that was like my first, gut instinct. A lot of like being brand new, a lot of what goes on through your mind is like, how the hell am I going to handle this? What's the paperwork going to be involved? But like, this is like the first time where I'm like, oh crap, like, what's going to happen here? So we position our cruisers, we shut off all the lights, and we walk down the driveway, and we start approaching the front door, and my sergeant's up to the door. He gives it a knock. And what was interesting is, the wife comes out. So a lot of stuff are going through our mind, and it's very quick, but a lot goes through your mind at the same time. And she comes out, and I'm just thinking, she's being held hostage, but has just come out. Like, what's true, what's not. You have to question everything. So she tells us, like, he has firearms. She does tell us, like, he'll shoot us if we go inside. But what's normal about New Hampshire, too, is you don't need a license to carry. Everybody has their firearms. You just expect firearms at every call. So someone having firearms wasn't that big of a deal. In the circumstances, yeah, it was. Again, she tells us information. He's upstairs in the bedroom sleeping. Also what's going through our mind is, okay, we just walked basically across a front yard. If you want to take us out and we walk back to the cruisers, he very well could from the bedroom window. So, a lot of like things are crossing our mind. Go in, whatever.
Yeah.
And the seasoned cop, I was told a million times, like, you should have called the guy out, right? And speaking to that, I'm alive, she's alive, sergeant's alive.
You never want to second guess
Right.
yourself moving. We're not going to Monday morning quarterback the incident. We never want to do that.
It is what it is. It
Right.
happened the
There's
way it
so many
happened.
things that you could say that you could have and should have done, but it didn't. It's not
Right.
how it works. So
Right.
there's no reason to even talk about it.
So we go into the house, and immediately around the first corner, he's right there with a gun pointed at us. He wasn't upstairs. I think through all the noise, he probably made his way downstairs. So he has a .45 caliber semi-auto gun pointed at us, and immediately, the firing goes off. He shoots 6 bullets in my direction, and 2 hit me in my right and dominant arm.
What's his name? Where's the stairs at?
Right here, next. He's like so right past that.
205, make an entry. Hey! Heavens! 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 Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
Drop the gun! Show your fucking hands now!
One at gunpoint. Drop the gun! Show your hand! No. 205, shots fired. Show your... Fuck, I'm shot. Officer shot. Fuck. 205, officer down. Paul, take your gun.
Is he still?
Ma'am, get up there, let's go. Paul, get your gun. My arm. Ma'am!
I'm right here. Whose car is this? That guy's car. Guys, Chief, why should
205, shots fired, officer down.
Immediately, just time stood still. Until I saw the body camera 4 months later, thought I was frozen in my tracks for over 30 seconds. I watched the body camera back, and I went to the left immediately. I called for that I was shot immediately, and I was so surprised by that.
Your training kicked in.
Yeah, and but I just remember the image in my head. So I was hit twice in my arm. I'm all scarred up. And I just remember the image of my arm swinging behind my back and me having no control of it, just, dangling. And I'm like, at the same time, like, holy crap, like, my life's, changed forever. I'm never going to come back from this. But also at the same time is like, shoot, guy is still alive and shooting at us. So just so much is freaking crossing your mind. So people ask me a lot, did the pain hurt? And my answer is, it's not the physical pain that you worry about immediately. It's all the mental stuff that's going in your heads. So to continue forward with the story, we go back to where the cruisers are at to position ourselves at a safer location. My sergeant gets the one rifle out of the cruiser because we just emptied the other one because we were dropping the car off, and he positioned himself over the hood of the cruiser, and I'm essentially bleeding out at the side of the road. So talking about the mental challenges, I'm just thinking, shoot, am I going to bleed out? Am I ever going to see my family again? Is guy going to come out from the house and kill me, my sergeant, or the wife right now? And it just, all that noise is in your head, and it's hard to control. But at the same time, like you have a mission ahead of you too, so you can't let it distract yourself too much. So fortunately, I learned an artery was severed, and that's why I was bleeding so much. Fortunately, my sergeant had a tourniquet on his vest. He tosses it to me. At the same time, that's when backup finally comes. So probably 25 minutes after we call. So the backup that came got the tourniquet on me. I got hit in the biceps and in the forearm.
So another officer from a different agency shows up and puts the tourniquet on.
Correct.
Could we give a shout out to that cop? Or first name, or maybe the first initial?
So he's a blur to me, and he
Really?
has been since. Like he's part of the story. He's
Sure.
like, a lot of it is just a blur in my head.
Well,
and
big shout out to that guy.
a big shout out to him, and I wish I have connected to him more. Just there were so many people all around me that night.
Maybe he'll be listening to this,
Yeah.
and it could be a way for you guys to reconnect.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
Can I back you up for just a second? Sure. And can we go back into you walking? You said you turned the corner and there he was.
Yeah.
What's that first thought? Like, is it, oh shit, what do I do? I mean, what's that first thought? Then he's not going to shoot me. I mean, I don't.
So I want to say, honestly, I remember everything except for that 15 seconds. Like,
That makes
I
sense.
didn't know what that memory entailed until I actually watched the body camera 4 months later. Okay. I'll talk about this more later. I see a therapist, and I asked her, I'm like, why don't I have this memory? And she told me, she's like, when adrenaline is pouring so strongly, things aren't stored in short-term memories, therefore they can never get into your long-term memories, so you just lose, that memory altogether when there's such a big adrenaline dump.
Yeah.
So, I can assume that, my adrenaline was so high.
Yeah.
I had never, so I'm not someone that curses often, which is rare. I cursed, for the first time at that call on the body camera, which my department still teases me for because they know it's a big deal that
You
I cursed.
apologized?
Yeah, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I cursed. Someone
Where's the soap?
Someone had a gun pointed at my head, and I told him to drop that effing weapon. Like, how dare me?
I'm sorry, sir.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Wow. So what ends up happening to the shooter?
Yeah, so they did not find this out for 12 hours later. I, at that point, was, at the hospital. They surrounded the house, and he ended up taking his own life. My sergeant emptied his full mag on the guy.
Okay.
And he took 3 rounds from my sergeant. The autopsy, when the case closed, determined that those 3 bullets would not have killed him. What did kill him was a shotgun to his chest that he did himself.
Wow. So, this coward knew that he was facing some smoke coming down range. And your sergeant, great aim by your sergeant, first off, right? Shot him 3 times center mass.
Yeah.
And then this guy ends up just ending his own life.
Correct.
Probably, who knows if he even felt the 3 rounds hit him, because you're saying he was so high on however many pills of Xanax.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thankfully he took his own life and wasn't able to hurt anybody else after that.
Absolutely.
So you get this tourniquet on yourself, right? How far are you from the hospital?
So I worked in Weare. Concord Hospital was the closest hospital. It was about 20 minutes away.
Were you loaded into a patrol car, or did they wait for an ambulance to bring you?
So I was okay. So let's back up for a second. So all the mental noise in my head, and we wanted enough backup to be there for my sergeant before I was taken away. So when the 3rd patrol car got there, that's when I was brought to the ambulance. I was brought in a patrol car, and I was placed in the back seat. It's plastic back there, right?
Yeah.
So like you slide around. So people ask me, physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
There is an adrenaline dump. The first time I actually felt the pain was when I was being taken away in the patrol car, because I think what was going on was, my mind was starting to feel a little more safe. I had all these concerns for wife, sergeant, the people surrounding the house, but I think my mind was telling me, like, bro, like you're getting to a safer position, let's bring all the pain.
Yeah.
So I was with my jacked up arm that was just shot twice. Every turn we take, I was sliding my arm. It was like so freaking excruciating. I just like I still remember that pain because it was so
Yeah.
bad. And then finally we get to the ambulance. They're stationed at a place called Country Three Corners in town. It's a food market, and they load me into the ambulance, and then they start giving me fentanyl. And I'm like, oh, sweet.
Thank
This
you.
is incredible. Keep it coming. Yeah.
And then you get to the hospital, and do you remember like going into the OR? Do you remember like?
Yep. So I woke up 12 o'clock p.m. that day to start my shift. I went to the gym, went to work, and a surgery didn't go on till 12 hours after I was at the hospital. So about 1 p.m. And the shooting went down at 2 a.m. So the tourniquet was on me. They probably believed I was stable enough. So I remember, being on the bed with a lot of cops were already there giving me support. And from that bed I was on, I had to call my mom, right? Because they wanted me to break the news to my mom, because we all know parents, if an officer called my mom, was like, hey,
Yeah.
your son was shot,
Yeah.
she would need to hear from me.
Right. So what was that conversation like?
So that was so difficult. I mean, how do you tell your mom that you'd just been shot, right? And she handled it a lot better than I thought she would. I think she was being strong for me. I don't know what her hour-long car ride was. She came immediately to the hospital. I don't know what was going through her mind during the car ride, but when I talked to her over the phone and in person, she was strong for me.
That's great.
But it was so difficult.
And I've met your mom, and she's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, she also throws a pretty mean pitch.
Oh, yeah.
at the
So
Mets
I
game.
threw first pitch at the Mets game, thanks to Austin Hare, to my mom. It was a full circle moment.
Yeah. So you have surgery you said about, what, 10 hours after the actual shooting occurred?
Yep. So surgery was 1 p.m. the next day, and it was delayed a little longer because my sisters wanted to see me, who live in New York, before I went into surgery, because nothing is promised. And I didn't know how bad it was until a month later, when I was getting surgery number 2, that the surgeon told me that they were worried for me from the amount of blood that I lost. So I guess it was a closer call than I thought. But my sisters wanted to make it down to see me before I went in, which I'm happy that they did. I mean, because you never know. You never know if
Surgery could have went wrong.
Yeah. So I saw them at that point. Like I said, I was up 25 hours because I woke up 12 p.m. the day before, to go to the gym to start my shift. And then 1 p.m. the next day is when.
And I'm assuming you're pretty close to your family, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm incredibly close to my family.
Yeah.
And, I try to be even more now. Once you go through something like that, you learn how fragile life actually is. And you want to keep the people that matter close.
Yeah. Walk us through, what was like your daily routine going through after just being shot multiple times in the arm?
Let's back up a second. What was it like waking up after the first surgery?
Oh, sure. Good question.
Yeah, so after the first surgery, I was just freaking thankful to be alive. So I remember the doctor came in, and he essentially gave me the worst news of my life. And at the time, I just didn't care. It didn't faze me. He came in, and he's like, hey, man, I do have to tell you, your nerve was destroyed, and you're not going to be able to use your hand anymore. I'm like, all right, sweet. Like, I'm alive. Like, I'm good. Thank you for that information, but it's not a concern right now. And, little did I know, that's changed the course of my life forever.
Right.
But it was just gratitude, to answer the question. Waking up after the first surgery, knowing what just came before me. I was here, and so many officers who go through similar things aren't fortunate enough to survive. And
I'm gonna take you back even further, because
Sure.
once you get shot, I'm wondering what your mindset is. I know you said you moved, you saw what you did, but as far as, is there any point that you go, oh shit, I'm gonna die, or are you fighting the whole time? Because it's very important, because you hear about police officers being shot and going, no, I'm not dying out here, and they will themselves to live when they should have been.
you can't quit. You have to stay in the fight. And I was never going to give up. I was going to give everything I had to make sure I made it out alive that night, right? A seed in my mind told me that anything could happen. And that was a problem. So I wasn't going to quit. You have to stay in the fight, because as soon as you choose to give up, your body's going to give out on you.
Yeah.
So I needed to keep the mindset that like something could happen, but I was going to do everything to avoid that.
Yeah.
So again, going back to you're waking up, the doctor's telling you that you're not going to have use of your hand. And I'm sure they're telling you that you're going to have to go through an immense amount of physical therapy to try to gain back some type of use of your arm.
Right.
So what was the actual therapy like? Or what is it still like?
So I have to talk about the surgeries before I can even explain the therapies.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the initial surgery 1, we got rods in my forearm and my bicep area to keep the bones intact so they could heal properly. I was told that my nerve was severed. So surgery number 2 was September 12th, which was to fuse the nerve back together. The problem with nerves is they take really, really long to regenerate. So we did not know if it worked or not until a year and a half later. Right. So that year and a half, and I am at heart an optimist. So like in my mind, it was, I was wrong, but it was a no-brainer. I'm like, oh, it's totally going to regenerate. Like things have been going well for me. Like I just survived this call, right?
Just stay positive through the
And,
entire thing.
I stay positive, and I would tap my arm, and I still do. I feel like electrical currents, bolts coming through. So I'm like, oh, that must be a sign. So everything was a sign to me. So I was totally optimistic, thinking that it would come back, and maybe that helped me through that year and a half, even though it ended up being wrong. So it was just it was staying positive, and then finally after multiple tests, it was determined that it just wasn't going to regenerate, and we had to do a major surgery that took hours, and it was literally rebuilding my arm with different tendons, which it's been a year and a half now out from that surgery, and it's still a lot of training every day to learn how to use my hand again. And, I had to learn how to wiggle my finger. I had to learn how to open my hand. When you have radial nerve damage, it affects, 3 things. So you are able to close your hand, but you're not able to open your hand. You're not able to move your wrist around at all, and you lose feeling in your pointer finger and your thumb. So I still have a lot of problems with my wrist. So it's basically just a stiff wrist at this point. Like writing's very difficult, and anything involving my wrist is hard. So like if I go to take a sip of water and I'll try to sip it as it gets close, my wrist will just collapse just because there's not a lot of wrist use there. So
Well, since the last time I've seen you, though, you've made a remarkable recovery thus far.
yeah.
And I know that I think this actually can help transition into the social media topic that we wanted to discuss, because you've essentially documented your progress from day 1 after the shooting up until today.
Right.
And you were actually on social media prior to the actual shooting itself. I've seen that you have a lot of videos of yourself during the academy talking about the process of the academy, and then, of course, this terrible incident occurs. But kind of, walk us through how social media has changed your life, how it helped in the recovery process, and, how you've become this this shining example of recovery on the social media platforms.
So I do not know where I would be without social media. And I want to tie this whole picture together and bring up purpose again, right? So I started this entire conversation saying purpose is what matters to me. So my dream job was taken from me, right? It's been 3 years, and if right now it's mid-July, 3 years will be on August 1st. So if I were to have done nothing over this 3 years and lose all my purpose in life, then that's when I would have started feeling the depression. So being able to, so there's multiple factors of why social media is important to me. Number 1, every show you watch where someone gets shot, in 2 weeks they're good to go. And it's not how it is in the movies. I am almost 3 years out, and I can still barely use my arm and hand. The real life thing after you get shot, it's a whole lifelong recovery, and that's just real life. So I want people to know it is not how it is in the movies. Secondary, sharing my story of recovery has brought a lot of people reaching out to me saying they relate to my story. They appreciate me as an inspiration. It feels like I'm doing something, even though I, for a second there lost my purpose by losing, my dream career.
Did you know early on that you weren't going to be able to return to the police force, or was that something that came later on into the recovery process?
So again, as an optimist, I I think in one of my first interviews, I think I said, "Yeah, I'm going to get back out there in 4 months," so which was totally naive of me. But again, like at that time, I felt like a superhuman. I literally just survived something that could have easily taken my life. So if I could have survived that, why couldn't I get back out there? So for me, that was the plan. I really thought I could, and then over time, I realized that this is my dominant arm and hand. And you need to fight for your life at times. And when you have your dominant arm and hand down, like you won't be able to do that. You won't be able to protect yourself, your partner, or the community in the way that you need to. Not to mention, though, we haven't got into it yet, the mental health baggage, which
That's what I was just going to ask you about.
over time, I realized is more of a problem than I even thought. So want to transition into that?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I want to talk about how it first came about too. So when you get involved in a shooting, you're very much isolated into a safe location. For me, it was 4 months until I started desk duty, home at my apartment in my little bubble with tons of family around, tons of support, flooding in. I just felt very safe after a very traumatic event. One night, about 3 months after the shooting, I was just simply showering and my eyes were closed, my mind was elsewhere. And all of a sudden, I just heard a bang. I'm like, holy crap, what was that? Like, I froze up. Like, I was stuck in my tracks again for like probably 5 seconds. I looked down and there was shaving cream on the ground that I must have knocked over and it fell and it sounded like a gunshot. As soon as that happened, I'm like, oh, geez. Like, it was like that oh crap moment. And I was like, I'm affected by this. That was just freaking shaving cream that caught me by surprise. What's going to happen when, real stuff goes down. Especially at that time, I thought I was going back. So I'm like, I need to get a grip on this. So I have a history, studying mental health. It's always been important to me. I always appreciated it. I see its worth. I see its value. So I wanted to talk to someone. So I talked to a therapist and still do, a therapist that specializes in first responders. So as quickly as I could, I got myself into therapy, and it's been a long road since. And I won't say that I've come back from it entirely, but I've been doing exposure therapy since December 2019. What that is, for people that don't know about it, is you basically pick 5 to 10 things and you rate them on a scale of 1 to 100. So the higher the number, the higher anxiety that you get from, that task. So I was listing a few. I'm like, driving by the house, that could give me anxiety. Going to a gun range, that could give me anxiety. Doing ride-alongs, that would probably give me a lot of anxiety. So we started by going to drive by the house. You are supposed to do it until, the 50 out of 100 goes down to like a 10. It gets to a normative level. So then once you get through that, then you go to the next thing, a gun range. Get that number down. And for me, I'm still doing the ride-alongs because I haven't got those numbers down. The problem is, like, you can't predict any call. So as soon as there's something unknown, that's when I start feeling the triggers. So my heart will race, I'll freeze up, and I'll be doing a ride-along, and we'll be doing a simple motor vehicle stop, and I can't see the officer because, the angle of the car is just blocking him, and the whole time I'll just be overload of anxiety, wondering what's going to happen just because I don't know. I can't see. So
I also think that might just be the police officer inside of you.
Yeah.
Just you know that a fellow officer is conducting a car stop, and which we all know car stops are some of the most dangerous things that we can do because you don't know what you're walking up on.
Right.
So yeah, I'm sure it is exposure therapy for you, but also just it's that instinctual fact that you're a cop. There's another cop out there doing his duty, and you want to be by his side, God forbid something were to go wrong.
Right, yeah.
So, I think any of us would have probably the same. I do it all the time. If I'm driving down the road off duty and I see a police officer pulling somebody over, I tend to slow down.
Yeah.
I make sure to look because God forbid if I see, an exchange of gunfire or, the person exit the vehicle when they're not supposed to, I think we all want to, help. So I think that's extremely natural for you to feel that way.
And Austin would be the one to come up on something like
I've
that.
had many off-duty incidents which I don't want to talk about on the show because I've gotten in trouble for a few of them. Nothing bad, though. I've always done the right thing. I've never gotten actually in trouble. But, I led, I think, my department at one point with the most off-duty incidents in 1 year.
I was actually FaceTiming you one day and something went down. Like I was, because New York road rage drivers.
Yeah.
Someone got out of his car like screaming in someone's face, and you're like, "Hey,
You're
man,
right.
I
Yeah,
do remember
yeah.
that.
It wasn't. I wasn't involved in the actual road rage incident, but I do
Yeah.
remember they were about to exchange fists. And,
No, you were the rager. You
No,
caused
no,
it.
I would never. No, and I remember that actually. And I lowered my window and essentially, calm the situation down. But yeah, I'm a black cloud. I tend to walk into shit all the time. I'm not gonna lie, it happens a lot. But yeah, anyway. So
What's the importance? I'm sorry, I'm getting right back into it. But what's the importance of a support system? Was your department there through this whole thing? Are they still there with you through the whole thing? Your family? What's the importance of support to get you through something like this?
Support is probably number one, and I tell officers now. So sharing my story, just to give the significance of it, has a lot of cops that have been shot in the line of duty reaching out to me. And I tell them there's going to be a honeymoon phase where in the first few months, you're loaded with people reaching out. You're loaded with, people sending care packages. You're loaded with nonprofits reaching out. And then it fades as fast as it comes. So if you don't capture those supports in the beginning, they're going to fade away and you're going to have nothing and you're going to feel very alone through all of this. So for me, what has gotten me through is the opportunities and support that social media has brought me. A lot of nonprofits bringing me to events, bringing me to meet other injured cops, keeping me distracted. And I will use the word distracted, even though it's not really a positive word, from all the crap that I'm going through, 5 surgeries, loss of my arm. It just keeps you excited. It keeps you not feeling alone. And that's one more thing. People ask me, what is the hardest challenge for you? And they ask me thinking that I'm going to say something physical. And it's not the physical challenges. What is the most challenging thing for me is loneliness. Because I'm now 30 and medically retired. I retired October 2021. Everyone my age is out there working. There's 7 days in a week. Even if I fill 3 of them, there's still 4 days left where I'm just sitting there alone in the apartment, just wondering what to do with myself and my life.
yeah.
So loneliness can be hard. So if you don't keep people around, you can spiral downward very quickly. So you just got to get yourself involved as much as you can. That's what has helped me, truly.
And you're very involved with multiple organizations that I follow you on. And now I know one in particular that you're very, very fond of. You were talking to me about it actually yesterday when we were eating pizza. I brought Paulie to have a nice New York slice of pizza yesterday. He ate like 10 of them. Tried a bunch of different pizzas.
I'm like, I don't come to New York often.
Yeah.
Austin treated me, and I kind of felt bad because I'm like, oh, do I really need 10 slices? And I'm like, yeah, I totally do.
Yeah,
He's
so he did.
paying
He ate them all. He tried 10 slices. No, it wasn't 10. It was like, what, 4 or 5?
Yeah.
5, but I mean, 5 slices. That's
a lot.
still a lot. All
growing
different
boy.
types. And so if you recall, we were having a really nice conversation about one of the organizations that you're involved with. And it's a pretty intense organization physically.
It is.
So tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. The nonprofit is called Operation Enduring Warrior, right? So they help out veterans, police officers, and firemen who have been severely injured in the line of duty. So if you are severely injured, you become a rank called an honoree. So basically what an honoree does is say, I have a dream to do this very physical thing somewhere in the country. It can be a Spartan race. It can be climbing a mountain. It can be anything that they dream of. And it's the nonprofit's mission and goal to get that honoree through it. So they'll have a rank called a masked athlete where they'll wear a mask, keep their identity sealed because they want the sole and only attention to be on the honoree. So it is their job to get us through whatever we choose. For instance, we're climbing a mountain at the end of August, and they'll make sure it is safe for us. So if there's a wall we need to climb and I can't do it because I'm an arm down, then they'll harness me and they'll pull me up. If there's monkey bars, which is also a challenge for me, I'll either climb over them or I'll get on someone's shoulders and do it as much as I can. So the whole purpose is to empower the honoree and basically say that you are more physically capable than you think. And by the end of the race or the mission, we'll feel so good about ourselves because we just did something huge that we didn't think we ever could again.
Wow.
That's a great organization. So shout out to them. We'll definitely we'll plug their link and their website so people can take a look and check them out and donate. And now there's another organization which I'm going to give a shout out to, a shameless shout out that the 3 of us here, actually all 4 of us, are connected to, which is Law Enforcement Officers Weekend.
Heck yeah.
I know that organization. I know that organization has sent you to a few different events in the past.
Have. I know the president. He's
You
a good
might know the
friend.
president.
Yeah.
And of course, we have Joe, who's our director of media, and we have Eric, who comes out to all of our law enforcement events, especially up in Lake George. And he's one of our comedians, our resident comedians that we have. So tell us.
I didn't know we had resident comedians, but all right.
You are our resident comedian. So, tell us about the times that you've come to some of the events, what it's like, and what it's like to connect with other officers that have gone through an experience that you've been through.
So we talk about support, right? And LEO weekend, the purpose is, I could use the word again, distraction, right? To give the person the best weekend of their life. There's so much going on, and this is just a weekend to have a lot of fun. But for me, what's the most important is the people I meet along the way. And I think that's why you choose, LEO weekend chooses multiple families or multiple officers, so we can build that connection. So the event that I was chosen to go to was Long Beach, New York, 2021, where LEO weekend had 5 officers that had been severely injured in the line of duty to go out together and just to give us the weekend of our lives. In that weekend, I made one of my best friends in the entire world, Jesse Hartnett, a Philadelphia police officer that was ambushed, and, he survived.
2016, I believe it was?
2016.
2016, yeah. Many of you probably have saw that incident.
In the car, right?
Yeah, on television. Mm-hmm. I think it was like, wee hours in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's at a red light, and this, we'll call him a person, walks up on him in full ISIS garb, and he pledged his allegiance to ISIS, and he just starts putting rounds into his car, point blank range, and he got hit multiple times.
Yeah, I believe the person shot over 10 rounds. Jesse was hit multiple times. He got out, he shot back, he hit the guy in the butt, slowed him down enough where the guy was actually able to be detained. So,
yeah.
He's a hero, and him and I connected because of that weekend. And you bring up support. What gets me through this is meeting people that have gone through similar situations and, imagining ourselves in a world where we can be our fullest self again, and we help each other get to that.
Yeah, and now we have another weekend coming up actually in 2 weeks in Long Beach again, 2022. And you and Jesse both gave us names of officers that are going to be attending this year.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. You guys are creating almost like a legacy.
Yeah, we know what it does for us going to weekends like this, so we want to give that back in a way we can. LEO weekend sets it up, but if we can give a name, it also helps us feel good that we're doing something for somebody else that was so significant for us in our recovery.
Yeah. So what's the future hold for Paulie Paul?
So right now, as much as I can dream big, and I do, I just had my 5th surgery in November. I just had a huge setback last August where my humerus split in half where I initially took the bullet. So as much as I dream, it's recovery. It's still day-to-day going to physical therapy, going to events where I can work on my mental health, which is helpful by meeting other injured. So just working on the mental and physical recovery is what I have to focus on right now.
If you could reach the masses of officers that have been seriously injured in the line of duty, whether they're having physical issues, mental issues, what advice would you give them to be able to overcome whatever obstacles in front of them?
Advice that I would give other injured officers is, as much as you want to be optimistic like I am, it kind of leads at times to devastation, right? So I keep having my setbacks. So the point of this is know that it is going to be lifelong. If you know that it's going to be a lifelong battle, then you won't be surprised as much. Secondary to that is find good people in your life and keep them, because they are the people that are going to get you through the times that are most challenging. You're going to have those days that are lonely. Like I said, I'm alone a lot at my department. If I didn't have my best friends to call to be like, hey, man, I'm in a situation right now and I just need someone to talk to, then it would be even worse. So find the resources that are helpful for you. For me, it's the ones that get me out there. I know not everyone has that personality. Find what works for yourself and hold on to it and don't lose it.
That's great advice. Because you're right, everyone is different, right? Not every police officer that even we reach out to, or not just police, but law enforcement, first responders, they may not want to come to an event.
Yeah.
They may have a really hard time talking about what you just told us. Everyone's different. So just like you said, if you're listening, which we hope you are, find that little niche and just crush it, whatever it is.
It's absolutely important that we have officers and first responders like you to come on that are willing to talk about it, because there are others who are out there who are going through similar instances, but they don't have somebody to talk to. They don't have that release. And so to hear it and to hear, okay, I'm not by myself. There's somebody else going through this. It works wonders for people. And I think that's what critical incident stress management is all about.
Yeah, and with that being said, this is actually an idea that Paulie had quite a while ago, last year when we spoke about this, and then Eric and Joe and I, we were all talking about this at a separate discussion. We want to hopefully use this podcast to create a community of first responders where they can connect with one another even offline. They could discuss the podcast that they just watched, but also if they themselves were involved in an incident, they can communicate with one another and discuss what they're doing to better their lives.
Yeah.
And I want to definitely get you involved in that, and maybe you could help build this community. But that's essentially what part of this podcast is going to be, is creating this grassroots community movement where officers from throughout the United States or even other overseas can get together to support one another. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we're trying to make it that these become almost like a critical incident stress management counseling session, because people, like I said, they can connect with how you're feeling and what you're going through and going, oh, I feel the same way. I feel the exact same way. But nobody, and now they have somebody that can empathize with and discuss it.
Do you have a lot of officers that reach out to you and say, hey, listen, I follow you on social media and I've gone through a similar incident?
All the time, and that's what is keeping me going forward too. So at a time that it happened for me, I didn't know any officers that existed that gone through a shooting, because officers really don't put themselves out there all that much. For the amount of officers that get shot in the line of duty, a very small number actually share their story. So those officers are difficult to find. So TikTok is just what's in right now. So I don't know many other injured officers that are sharing their story on TikTok. So, I'm one of the only ones people find. So because of that, almost every day officers are reaching out saying their story, not just with shootings, but if they've been involved in car wrecks or if they've been doing motor vehicle stops and they got hit and now they're experiencing post-traumatic stress from, being hit by something like that. A lot of people are not quite at the stage yet where they're willing to talk about their recovery or their mental injuries. So seeing that I do openly, it helps them share what they want to with me.
I've seen your fan base. It's pretty substantial. I know that you have a lot of followers, a significant amount of followers. How many followers do you actually have on TikTok?
I reached, 1.3 million, and it's all just through sharing the recovery, being open and being sincere.
One of the inspiring things that, you're putting yourself out there with us now, 3 years post-incident, but you actually created TikTok the day after the incident, the day after your surgery. What led you to put yourself out there from the hospital? What was it that led you to wanting to document this in the way that you did?
So interestingly about myself, I have documented every chapter of my life openly since, I was a kid. I've always loved video logging. I always loved sharing stories and photos. And again, especially with, being shot on the line of duty, it's rare that people do open up about it. So I wanted to, share the recovery, share the raw, share the hardships of it, and just show people what it actually looks like.
And you've done a phenomenal job. I'm going to give you a little pat on the back. You have. I've watched your TikToks for, about almost 2 years now, probably?
Yeah.
Even before I really knew who you were. Zach Grunther, who's the vice president of Law Enforcement Officers Weekend, actually found you on TikTok.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how many followers you had at the time, not nearly as many as you have now. And he said, hey, listen, you gotta watch this guy. Just the way that he communicates his recovery process is pretty amazing. And I remember watching your videos and going, wow, this kid, because really you still are a kid, right? You were definitely a kid at the time. And for someone to be able to grasp an audience of that size, and just by doing a 20-second video, that's a pretty significant accomplishment all in itself. So I got to give you credit, which I don't like to do very often, because I know you and I had really good banter going back and forth.
Yeah,
we joke around a lot with one another, but I got to give you credit because you've taken this platform, which essentially was created for young kids, 13 years old originally, for dance videos and singing. And you have helped morph this social media platform more into a service for first responders or even those who may not even be part of our community, but just maybe they're dealing with their own issues at home, and you're an outlet for them, and you've done a really phenomenal job with that.
The human to human connection is everybody goes through their crap. Everybody has their baggage. So somebody's baggage or crap might not look like mine, but they're going through something and probably something difficult. So seeing somebody going through something difficult but doing well, it inspires people, and that might sound presumptuous, but that's usually how people connect. Seeing something or someone do well through something hard is inspiration to a lot of people.
It
They
is.
say.
It is, and I've seen you going from trying to throw a baseball, which you still need to definitely work on, to even open, a can of soda or a bottle cap. And I know that every day you're progressing, and you still have a really long way to go. But it's an inspiration to be able to watch you do all that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I won't give you any more compliments moving
Guys
forward.
want a room?
Yeah.
I was like, he was starting to get in the compliment mode, and I was just thinking of other stuff. I'm like, I don't need this right now.
No, like I said, I got to give you credit where credit is due, and you've done a really good job. And again, that's it. I'm not giving you any more compliments.
Just more pizza.
I'll give you some more pizza.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
We can go get dinner tonight. We'll get you some. Actually, we'll do a little bit more of a fancier dinner tonight.
Listen, for me, it was an honor to meet you. I had never met you before. He had told me all about you, and to hear your story is just, it's phenomenal to hear you share it, because you're right. Not a lot of police officers are sharing their stories when they've been involved in this, and it's so important for other police officers to hear somebody who's gone through it, who's going through it, who's living with it, who's dealing with it, who's coping with it. It's very important for them to hear it and to know that they're not alone and they can get through it. So thank you so much for being on here on our first official podcast.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'm glad. Like I said, I couldn't find it originally. So if people can watch this and see this and have someone to reach out to, then that's giving me that purpose that I wanted all along.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, I think you've been an unbelievable first guest. I see this podcast going far.
It seems like they're kicking me out the door, doesn't it?
No, we're not.
They're like,
kicking
oh,
out.
like it's time to go, like get away.
We're just gonna go get food somewhere. We're all
starving.
hungry. We've been here all
hungry.
day.
But I have a feeling that this podcast is going to take off. And being that you are the first guest of hopefully many, many more, and I'd love to have you come back and give us updates throughout the your recovery process. And again, we would love to get you involved in the community aspect of this. I think that you can be one of the figureheads of bringing a lot of these first responders together. I'm really looking forward to it. And again, thank you for coming out here, driving from New Hampshire, bringing donuts for us.
That you wouldn't let me eat till
Which
3
I won't
hours
eat.
later.
It's been an honor. Thank you for the service that you provide to your community for those, even if it was only for those 8 months. Again, I think your things happen for a reason, right? And I don't want to say you got shot for a reason, but you're taking that reason and you're making something even better out of it. You're helping a lot of people, even if you don't think you are, or even if you're not trying to. You are. You're making a huge impact on people's lives. So you're doing a great job. You're doing a kick-ass job. And on behalf of the muster room and everybody else, just keep doing what you're doing. And for those of you who haven't followed Paulie on social media, give them your handles. And
So the handle is @PauliePaul, PAULIEEPAULL. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram. I just started a Facebook page. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, Paul Lewis. Find me on all platforms.
awesome. So we'll throw those up on the website and on the video. And if anybody has any questions for Paulie, shoot him a question on one of the social media platforms. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer.
I am happy. Like I said, this is my thing. This is what's getting me through the day-to-day, helping others. So please reach out. Actually do.
Well, guys, with that being said, this has been the first official episode of The Muster Room. We hope you enjoy yourselves. We hope that you guys come back for the next few that we have coming up our sleeves. Eric, as always, pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thanks.
You're an unbelievable co-host.
Let me just say this to everybody out there in law enforcement, first responders, please be safe. And the most important thing you can do is get home to your families.
Yeah, it's a great way to end this. So let's cut it there.